First of all, I want to welcome everybody who's here live at the Teachers Club, and I want to welcome those who will be watching on YouTube and on Facebook. Myself and Christy are going to have a little tete-a-tete and just talk about Christy's, more or less, his experience during the ballad boom and afterwards and what happened. So I'm slightly younger than Christy, and I would have come into a similar situation where my family were very interested in music and mainly singing. They had a wide taste in music. And in the 50s and early 60s, we used to listen to RTE, and we used to listen to the Walton Show, and there was always hoolies in the house where they'd be singing. There'd be a great eclectic mix of singing. I was interested during the ballad boom in the Dubliners and etc., etc. And then Danny Doyle and all of those people were. And one night I was watching Shay Healy's programme, Ballads. I think it was probably 68, maybe 69, and I was I was 18 at the time, and he introduced this fella, Christy Moore, and I think you sang The Dark-Eyed Sailor, possibly? No, right. Okay, but that's when I first became aware of you. But when I really became aware of you, when a couple of years later, Prosperous was released, and that just blew away the folk scene. It was just an unbelievable experience, and then you went on from there. So that's what the era that I'd like to talk to you about, or hear your memories of.
Well, for me, starting off, the first song I remember learning was Kevin Barry. And the next one I learned was The Meeting of the Waters, and that was both at my mother's prompting. My mother had a devotion to Kevin Barry, and there was always singing in the house at home. And as a young lad, as a small boy, I was a boy soprano, and I was invited to do a couple of concerts in the town of Newbridge. One, I still have a program from I think it's 1957, where I sing Kevin Barry and The Meeting of the Waters. And then I strayed away for a few years then with early rock and roll, until the first Clancy Brothers LP. A neighbour down the road, Pat McGowan, got this Clancy Brothers LP from his brother in London, and that's when the whole thing just changed. And I became aware of these kind of songs. And Donald Lunny, who lived just down the road from me, had a guitar, and I got a guitar, and he taught me 2 chords, and I started learning Clancy Brothers songs, The Jug of Punch, Whiskey or the Devil, Phelan Brady, The Bard of Armagh, and then I began looking for songs. I went down into the library in Newbridge and got some songbooks, and I remember finding the Joyce collection, and the Chor of Kildare was in that, and that was the first song I felt I discovered that was of local interest. I remember bringing it around to Donald, and there was no chorus in the song originally, but Donald turned, I think, the 3rd verse into the chorus, and that was the start of that song. And then, of course, we got the Colin McLaughlin street ballads, and Away on a Hack then, you know, there's such a richness of songs there, and never looked back since.
And how did you get the music for some of the songs? My problem was I couldn't read music, and there was none of my family could read music, so I couldn't read music, and so what I had to do was hunt around for someone who could sing the song, or maybe knew what it sounded, or an air that went to it. And how did you cope with that?
Well, we had a piano in the house, and I was able to pick out with a finger. I was able to pick out the kind of the melody, but then, of course, Donald could just like that. He was rapid, and he'd get it chorded, and he'd show me the chords, and so that's how it started off initially. Subsequent to that, I suppose, Donald had a band. Was in an early band. He was only a teenager at the time, called the Liffy Ciders.
Oh yeah.
And we started going out to Prosperous. That's when we became in touch with live traditional music for the first time, because there wouldn't have been any of that in Newbridge that we knew of. I don't think there was. But in Prosperous there was a branch of Kyotis, and they used to meet in Pat Dowland's pub every Wednesday night. And that's where we first heard Liam Og, was in Pat Dowland's. Heard Seamus Ennis there, and Barney McKenna, and Ted Fury. People used to come down from Dublin on the Wednesday night. And then afterwards there used to be fantastic sessions up in Rin's house that would go on all night. Yeah.
And would you like to give us a bit of a song, part of a song?
Oh yeah. The first one. In Mountjoy Jail one Monday morning, high upon the gallows tree, Kevin Barry gave his young life for a cause that liberty. Just a lad of 18 summers, yet there's no one can deny, as he walked to death that morning, he proudly held his head on high. So that was the first song. My mother used to sing that song.
There wasn't a hoolie in Dublin that song wasn't sung.
Yeah.
There wasn't a hoolie in Dublin that song wasn't sung at Christy.
Yeah.
When did you first start accompanying yourself with guitar?
Oh, very early on, when I was about 18. I remember Donald was left-handed, so I couldn't play his guitar. And then we were at a flagpole down in Portarlington, and I met a fellow there called Ned Bulfin. And Ned Bulfin had this old guitar, and he sold it to me for £3. And he didn't want the £3 on the day either, He just gave me the guitar. And it was a bad old guitar, but that's how I got started. And then when I came to Dublin, I started working in the National Bank when I was 18. And I remember going into McCullough Pickett's, and I got a guitar on the HP. And I thought it was a beautiful guitar. I was so proud of it. And then I was at a session one night, and I was sitting down. I remember I was sitting on the floor having a bottle of stout, and the guitar was propped up against the wall across the room. And I was looking over at it, and it began to slip. And it fell down and hit the floor, and the fucking neck came out away from the body. And I still had to keep paying for it, of course, because of the HP. And I got it fixed, but it was never right after that, So when I was about 18, I had the guitar going, going to the flats and singing. I remember I was described very early on as, your man who sweats. The fella that sweats, because the sweat just pour off me,
Yeah, the sweaty hero. Christy Moore, the sweaty hero. When you were how long were you in the bank before the strike happened?
3 years. I went in 1963, and I started off in Clonmel. My first posting was in Clonmel, where within a week I'd heard the Galtee Mountain Boy, Patsy Halloran singing the Galtee Mountain Boy. And I started seeking out songs then as well. And I remember from there I went to Tulla in County Clare, and that's the first time I heard Spancel Hill. And the following day I tracked down the words of Spancel Hill. So wherever I went, I'd be looking out for songs, So I was 3 years in the bank. 1966, there was a bank strike, and I went to England. And when the strike ended, I went off singing. I didn't.
You didn't return?
I came back for one day, because by coming back and signing the book, I got the strike pay.
All right.
I got that. Or it was back, not the strike pay. The deal was you got back pay.
Yeah.
And by coming back and signing on. And I remember at that time I was working in Ballyhaunis, and the bank manager was a man called Mr. O'Leary. And I remember him saying to me, you know, he said, you're giving up your pension rights here. You have 3 years pension. He said, in 42 years' time, you could be on a good pension.
And when how long did the strike last?
I think it was 4 or 5 months. It was a very long strike.
And you were, I have a vague memory of it. It was that was the year I first started working. I was 15, but I have a vague memory of the strike. But you spent the entire strike in England playing.
Well, I went over to, no, I wasn't playing at that stage. I was trying to get started, you know. I had my guitar, and I remember I used to go to sessions in London. At first I was in London, and I used to go to the White Hart and Fulham Broadway. I used to hear Raymond Rowland and Liam Farrell and Roger Sherlock and Martin Burns, and sometimes Raymond Rowland would invite me up to sing a song, and I remember him saying to me, do you play that bull fiddle, Hart? And he called the guitar the bull fiddle. And I got up and I sang a few songs, but at that time then I met up with the Graham sisters in London. I'd known them from the prosperous days and from going to the Flas in Boyle. But they had moved to England and were playing the folk scene around Manchester and Leeds. And they told me about this folk scene and invited me up. And I moved to Manchester and started going around the folk clubs. And that's when I got going, really, you know, but 1960, late 66, early 67.
Right. And then, so you came back, you signed off, and then did you go back immediately, or?
I went straight back, yeah.
Yeah, because you knew there was a life for you there.
Well, I hoped. I felt, you know, I suppose, something I should say is a few years previous to that, I heard Liam Clancy singing on the street at a flacciol in Bunclody. Sunday afternoon, I can remember it clearly, and he was standing there and he was singing the streams of Bunclody, and some kind of a light went on me. I said, "Yes, I'd love to be able to do that," you know. So there was a seed sown that Sunday afternoon in Bunclody, and then a few years later, I decided to have a go at it.
Yeah. And so you went back to England and you went back on the circuit again, did you?
Well, I got myself, as I said, I started going around the folk clubs, and then I became aware of this really vibrant folk scene in England. Like in Manchester, there was different clubs every night of the week. There was certain nights there'd be 2 or 3 folk clubs, and they'd all be advertised in the Manchester Evening News. Started going around and started getting floor spots. You know, you get invited up to do a floor spot. And then Mike Harding, you know the singer Mike Harding, Mike had a folk club out in a place called Blakely on the outskirts of Manchester, and he gave me my first gig. He ran a folk club in a pub called the Old House at Home. It's a great name for a pub. And that was my first proper folk singer gig.
Yeah, and did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, it was just amazing, because you know when you're in the pubs in London or even singing back here, you hard enough to get order, you know, but in the folk clubs, everybody, it's a bit like the Goleen, everybody listening intently, and when that's such a buzz, when you're passionate about your singing, and people want to listen to you, you know yourself, you know, it's such a privilege to sing a song to people who are interested in listening.
And then who else did you begin to meet at that time that influenced you?
Oh, all kinds of people. The Watersons, Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick, Jeannie Robertson in Scotland, Jimmy McBeat, Archie Fisher, Cyril Tawney, the whole lot. Over a period of 2 or 3 years, I encountered all these people and learned a lot from just being around them. You've been in their company.
Yeah, the folk scene was very, very vibrant at that time.
Very, yeah. And everybody helped everybody else out, you know. And I met up with Hamish Imlock, and Hamish lived in Motherwell in Scotland, and I met him in Manchester one night. I went to hear his gig, and we got chatting, and he just took me on the road with him. So it was kind of like a bit of an apprenticeship, really, you know. And he got me my first gigs in Scotland, and became a dear friend, and we remained close until he died. Still in touch with his family. It was a time of great learning, of a great apprenticeship, and hearing different songs and hearing the Watersons, hearing those four voices, and hearing Martin Carthy, of course Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger.
Yeah.
I got a gig in the Singers Club about 1968, and I sat on the stage with Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger when I was 23, and that was a big night for me.
Yeah. Ewan MacColl, he was very influential too, wasn't he?
Oh yeah,
and he was sort of an icon for many of the singers.
Well, he was he was kind of at the centre of the whole scene in a kind of a way. I mean, everybody knew about Ewan MacColl and the songs he was writing, as well as the traditional songs he was covering, you know.
Carrying, yeah.
And of course, Peggy Seeger was a sublime accompanist, still is. Went to hear her last year, myself and Val went to hear her last year, and the year before in the Pavilion in Dunleary. And it was, at 83, she gave this amazing performance, you know.
Yeah. She has a great vibrancy about her.
And great heart.
Yeah. And when did you come back from England to begin that phase of around the Prosperous album and that?
Well, prior to the Prosperous album, late 68, 69, I met up with Dominic Bean in London, and it was at I think it was at a Northern Ireland civil rights concert, and he was the headline singer, and I got a couple of songs, and we got chatting afterwards, and he invited me to his house. He lived out in Middlesex, himself and Josephine, and I stayed in the house quite a bit, and he said, I'm going to make an album with you, and he did. He set the whole thing up, organised it, produced it, and that was an album called Paddy on the Road.
Paddy on the Road, yeah.
The backing on it was a bit dodgy, but at the time I didn't recognise that. I thought, Jesus, making an album, I couldn't believe it. Because back then, making an album was a big deal.
Oh, big deal, yeah.
It's not like now where you learned a song in one day.
It was a big investment of time and effort, and then the
recording studios were huge, big buildings then, Whereas now recording studios, a few boxes you can have in your bag.
Yeah, there's a little Zoom recorder.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, it simplified it all right. And how did you find Dominica as a person?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. He was... I spent I had a little tape recorder at the time, and I remembered I had two C90 cassettes where I was just sitting, recording Dominic singing and playing and talking and telling yarns, and I found him an amazing man. At that time of my life, I was blown away by him. There was another side to him. I saw that as well. I won't go into it, but I saw the two sides of him, but he was a great help to me, and he encouraged me greatly and got me on a record when I was a young lad.
Yeah, Paddy on the Road.
Paddy on the Road.
Yeah, I believe there was 500.
500,
made, and
yeah.
If you get one now, it's worth a few bob.
So I believe, yeah. But at that time, when that came out, I was really proud of it. Because if you turned up at a folk club and you had a record, it made a huge difference, But then I was hearing Sweeney's Men. I remember getting the Sweeney's Men album, and that started something in my head then as well, There was a sound on that Sweeney's Men album that was brand new at the time, And I got this idea then of maybe coming back home and making an album. And Bill Leader, the sound, the record producer, engineer, great tutor, came to Ireland with a Revox reel-to-reel and 2 microphones. And we set 2 down in Prosperous. I wanted to go back to Prosperous because of what had happened there, And we recorded that album, myself, Andy, Donald, Liam, few other people played on it. Kevin Kniff played on it, Clive Collins, Dave Bland played concertina. And that was a great 2 weeks of my life, you know.
And did you have a feeling that this was going to change your life?
No. We just knew that we were having a real good time, and we knew that we were enjoying it, and the four of us were getting off on the fact of what we were hearing, you know. I got this idea and we started doing it, and it kind of worked. And when it came out then, we thought, would we come back together again? And at this stage we were scattered. Donald was in a band, Liam was teaching but had gone to America, and Andy was in Bulgaria or somewhere. But we came back together and we decided to try this band, which initially we called CLAD, C-L-A-D. And Christy, Liam, Andy, Donald. And we used to have a gig every Monday night in Slattery's in Capel Street. It was called the Mugs Gig. And we used to play there every Monday night with different guests, very different kind of guests, you know. And it just started to come together, you know. Such a great time. And then Andy knew a man called Des Kelly. He used to manage Sweeney's Men. And he went to Des Kelly and asked him would he manage Planxty, and he took us on. And he was managing a show band at the time called Cathy and the Fugitives. And they were just breaking up. So we got their van and their PA. And I remember there was loads of Cathy and the Fugitives photos under the seats. And we used to use the cardboard for roaches for the joints. And back then it was just the four of us in the van heading off. We played all over the country, you know.
Yeah. No, I remember that time. I remember when, after Prosperous came out, I was dying to hear more of that, and then Planxty started releasing things. And then I got the first Planxty LP, and then I emigrated to Australia. And when I was in Australia, I was hearing all about how Planxty were doing and releasing. So I heard that there was a place in Paddington run by a folk singer and collector called Warren Fahey.
Okay.
And he used to sell Australian tradition, because it was a big Australian traditional scene at that time.
Okay.
And he was recording them and that. So I went over to Paddington to see what I could find. And when I went in there, did he have all of the Planxty LPs? And I bought it. And at them days, it was an investment to buy an LP.
Yeah.
But I got me money out and I went and I bought them, you know. And I just thought it just changed Irish folk music and that whole scene very, very differently. The quality and the depth of it, just I felt was far beyond what we'd been hearing. We'd heard the McPeaks and that who did certainly, but what Planxty did, what the 40E did was just, I felt, was revolutionary really at that time. And
well, I have to say, I felt the same when I heard the McPeaks. I heard the McPeaks kind of in 1966. I heard them in Manchester, and I just thought they were wonderful.
Yeah, they were doing something different.
Oh God, yeah. They were great. Great vibe off them, you know. He also reminded me there that when we started off first, nobody could pronounce the word Planxty. People used to call us Planxty, Plantex, Planetaxi. It took a few years before people could say Planxty.
Yeah, well, it's in the lexicon now, and it'll never be lost, I think, you know. It was such an exciting time, and you started Planxty started touring fairly extensively, and the musical influences that you had, did they mainly, I presume that you all contributed, but to hear Liam O'Flynn playing the pipes on an accompaniment of with song, and that was just, I just thought was fantastic. I know that the McPeaks did it to some degree, but I just thought that she took it to a new level.
Well, I mean, latterly I've come to hear that what really gave Planxty its depth and its longevity was Liam. It was Liam's sound, was the beating heart of Planxty, you know.
Yeah.
And I think if you took the three of us, if you took myself, Andy and Donald, had we gone out on the road, we would have been probably a fairly good ballad group. We put Liam O'Flynn into it, and Majesty, and such beautiful playing. And,
it was a heady mix. It was just, it was so, but also the different approaches that Andy and Donald took with their music, the type of offbeats and that they played.
Well, their playing is, I mean, even it still sounds fresh today when you listen to it.
Absolutely, you know? yeah. And they last, those Planxty will be listened to, I think, for long into the future. And how did it change? You then became part of a band rather than singing as an individual.
I'm sure I was in heaven. I mean, I was playing with these guys whose music I really admired. I mean, when we were growing up in Newbridge, Donald had something that nobody else had. And even when he came to Dublin, up to the College of Art, he was way ahead of the posse with his playing, you know. Even before he ever played a bouzouki, he was a really great guitar player, you know. And then Andy, I mean, I was sitting in the middle of these three guys, and life couldn't have been better for me with regard to singing and playing.
Yeah, and just a combination of voices and that was just, fabulous. And then you made about 5-6 albums, was it?
The first time we were together, we made 3. That was in the early 70s, and in the late 70s we made 2 more. In 81 we made 1 more, and then we did another one in 2004. And it was great. Great old times, you know. I was curious there though, when you were saying you were in Australia and you were talking about were you singing in the folk scene in Australia?
I was singing all right, but no, I wasn't part of the folk scene.
Yeah.
I was more or less, when I was in Australia, I became involved. I was quite left wing, and I became involved with cultural groups, multinational cultural groups.
Okay.
And we used to have sort of concerts. There'd be Greeks and there'd be Turks and there'd be Lebanese and there'd be Irish and there'd be Scots and that. And we had this sort of international concerts, and I'd often sing at them. I used to play guitar at the time.
And what would you sing? Like?
Oh, what would I sang a lot of Australian traditional
Have
stuff.
you got one now?
Have I got one now? I suppose I could try and sing. I mightn't get through it all. Our Andy's gone with cattle now, our hearts are out of order. With drought to battle he has gone across the Queensland border. He has left us in dejection now. With him our hearts are roving. It's dull on this election now, since Andy went a-droving. That was the sort of stuff I used to
Lovely.
sing,
Beautiful. Your voice is great, Nick.
Lovely song. But the Australian folk scene was quite vibrant at that stage. And while I sang Irish songs, I became really interested in Australian folk songs. And I was more, wanted to learn them more than the Irish stuff. I had a good repertoire of Irish stuff. And the thing is now, I don't think there's anyone singing, or there's very, very few. There's no band or no movement of Australian folk singing.
Is there not?
It's gone. Seems to be gone completely.
Really?
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
We're very lucky here in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
God, we really are, you know.
Yeah,
The new voices that are emerging.
the new voices, the new approaches,
Yeah.
and the respect that Irish people have for the singing tradition is it's unique, I think, in many
I
ways.
heard Derry Farrell singing Ecstasia. He sang it on the television last week, and it was stunning.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
he's doing a great job, isn't he?
Yeah. Derry's one of those people, up and coming stars. But we have developed so many. You know, we've got Lancome, and we have Vagabonds, and you've McDarrah. I think I saw McDarrah here today. Yeah, McDarrah singing that just. Yeah, so
Don't forget Nathan Carter.
yeah. So we're very lucky, but it's something about the way we are as a people that there are certain aspects of our culture that we hold very dear.
Yeah.
And we have maintained it, which really hasn't happened a huge amount in the rest of the island. Maybe a bit in Scotland, and in Wales in a different way, but in Britain, in England rather, they've seemed to be. There are great singers there and that, but in general, the population as a whole don't have an appreciation for
But
it.
there's a thing happened in Ireland that I don't know if it happened anywhere else, where you could actually get traditional songs and folk songs, albeit arranged differently, but being top of the pops in Ireland. That didn't really happen anywhere else, you know.
No,
When you mentioned Danny Doyle there earlier on, and Paddy Riley, I mean, you had folk songs which became part of the national repertoire.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely, yeah.
Pete St. John, I mean, the Fields of Athenry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great song.
No, we have kept that.
Yeah.
We've kept that, and it has enriched us to a large degree. I know that that as we're getting older, less of the younger people are getting involved in it. But there's one thing that I was an engineering teacher for a long time, and engineering is an unusual subject to teach in that the kids are active in the classroom. They're moving around, okay, and then we're making stuff and they're banging and bashing and all that. So it's just an activity. But what I always did for them was I always played in the background music.
Yeah.
And Planxty, Lou Kelly, Christy Moore, and the two. Lou Kelly was far and beyond their favourite. The young people, they knew all of them, and then Christy Moore, right? Yeah. And so the kids do appreciate it. They're just not involved in it. There's very few of them singing, and I see it with my own sons and my daughter. They don't sing. David can sing. My youngest son, he can play music, but he doesn't do it actively.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's an awful pity, whereas our generation did it actively. So,
I don't know if I'd completely agree with you.
Go on.
I have a feeling that there's a huge lot of singing going on out there now. And I mean, I'll give you an example. I was lucky enough to get started back singing at a gig 2 nights ago in Vicar Street.
Yeah.
And I'd say most of the audience was well under 30. And they were singing their heads off. And they were singing songs that are fairly recent. Like, I got a request to sing a song called Sail On Jimmy, which it's also called Irish Pagan Ritual. Mm-hmm. And I started it off, and all these young people knew all the words. I was blown away by it, you know. Or songs like Ordinary Man and Jockshire Goes to Stuttgart, and they know the whole, and really singing them, you know.
Yeah, but are they singing outside of that? Singing with you? I mean,
the way they were singing the other
obviously
night,
listening to you.
The way they were singing the other night, they knew them.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as dead as some people think it is, you know.
Yeah. We talk about in the goal in we talk about some of these issues. And most of us in the Golan were singers all our life, our listeners. And then I know myself that I didn't really, when I came back from Australia, I had young children. I didn't have time to go to Golan or folk clubs or anything else. And it was only when they got to an age where they didn't need me to be there most of the time that I could go out on a Friday night and go to the Golan and begin singing again. And I think that we'll find that into the singing clubs, people will come basically when their kids are more or less reared. That's what I'd like it to be different, because I know when I went to the when I went to the
digging a hole for yourself.
Yeah, when I went to the Golan first, we were all much younger.
Yeah.
And anyway, we were and at that time, I would say the average age in the Golan was probably around 50. Yeah, 45, that sort of age. But now it's beyond that, you know. There's a few young fellas and young ones still around, but in general, we're sort of we all have. The most of us have the bus pass at this stage.
But then again, I mean, the Golan is a unique and wonderful institution. But then if you go to the Larry is a younger crowd, you know, and so there's other things happening. I mean, the Golan is, let's face it, it's the holy of holies. I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, coming into the Golan, it's such a. I know for myself and my wife, Val, it's precious. It's a very precious thing, and the way you nurture it and take care of it, and the way you look after anybody who wants to sing, no matter what they sing, whether they're good or bad or indifferent singers, get the same order and respect and encouragement, and that's very precious. So I applaud the Golan.
Thank you. And as we all know, you're part of the Golan. We're a family that we welcome everybody in. And anyway, will you sing us another song?
Yeah.
Good man.
I'll sing a new one, written by Ricky Lynch in Cork. I mightn't sing it all. The snow comes down, the snow. It's freezing cold, the snow come down and falls upon the barbed wire. Everything is ready, right on time, another train is due. Now it's coming down the line, it's heading for the fire. Just another December day in 1942. The train is filled with dispossessed people from the ghetto, treated worse than animals in some cruel, filthy zoo. I can't remember. It's the first time I've sung it, and it's written by Ricky Lynch in Cork. It's called December 1942, and a hard song to sing and a hard song to listen to, but I've just recorded it, and I'm really happy to have done it.
Take a minute, yeah.
I met up with Tommy Reichenthal, who wrote that book, The Boy in Belsen. I Was a Boy in Belsen. And about 2 weeks later, Ricky Lynch sent me the song, and just, it was almost like it was meant to happen.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, they dovetailed together. The two.
Yeah. I'm sorry I couldn't sing more of it there,
that's right.
but I just drew a bit of a blank on it.
Yeah,
you know?
You sing a lot about, your repertoire consists a lot about the underdog, the suffering, the people who suffer, the people who are mistreated, social issues like that.
I kind of grew up with that though. My mother was that way, and my father was that way. They both were people who were aware of what was going on around them. And my mother always her door was always open to the the oppressed and the people in need. And
people who have...
From what I know of my father, he was that way inclined too. He died when I was very young, but he was that way inclined. So it was in our that atmosphere we lived in it, you know.
And you were 11 when your dad died?
I was, yeah.
And he died suddenly?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's still with me.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but it must have been... You were the oldest of your family?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you at 11 years old, your father died. Did it affect you in a way that's still with you?
I'd imagine so, you know, I'd imagine so. I've learned a lot about the kind of thing, but it was very traumatic for all of us, you know.
Yeah.
But I sing, Eilish sings, Anne sings, Terry sings, Andy sings, and Luca sings. And Luca wrote and sang a song maybe 20 years ago called The Man Is Alive, The Man Is Alive in Me. And that's the way it is, really, you know. He's still knocking about.
And you're now a grandfather.
Yeah, to Sonny and Sylvie.
And how do you find being a grandfather? Did you ever think you would be a grandfather? Let's put it that way.
Well, I suppose growing up, I always had this thing that our father was 41 when he died, and I had this thing in the back of my head that I probably would go the same way. So now I'm 76 and very happy and a lot of gratitude for the life I have with Val. And grandkids they're brilliant. They're brilliant, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And how many have you now?
Two.
I've 5.
Yeah.
But it's not a competition. But
I always knew you had it in you.
But I just find the privilege of being a grandparent that I felt privileged when I think for myself when I became a father and my daughter was born. It changed my life. It was just one of the most cathartic things that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And it changed my life for the good. And I always loved being a father. I loved being a parent. And I didn't think I'd feel that when I became a grandfather, but I feel it just as deeply as a grandfather. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a fantastic privilege, yeah, that we've arrived at a situation.
Well, what I'm just thinking here now is we wouldn't get away with this kind of talk in the Larry. They wouldn't know what we were talking about.
They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't. Yeah. So,
I probably should explain to people who might be out there and in the other world that the Larry we're talking about is a monthly gathering in the Cobblestone. It's still in the Cobblestone, is it?
Still in the Cobblestone.
And it's called they call it the night before Larry was stretched. And it's, I suppose, in a way, it's kind of a child of the Goleen in a way, you know. This,
yeah, it would be influenced by.
Yeah.
And
the great respect there too for the song and the singer. And so the night before Larry was stretched, the night before Larry was stretched,
the boys, they paid him a visit.
A bit in their bags too they fetched.
They sweated their duds till they visit.
For Larry was ever the lad,
when one was confined to the squeezer,
would fence all the duds that he had,
to help a poor lad to a sneezer,
and mice in his gob before he died.
That's a long one. Yeah, that was one of Frank. That was the first person I ever heard sing. That was Frank Harte.
Did Zosimus write that?
No.
Did he not?
No, I don't. I think it's anonymous. I don't think they know who wrote it.
Because I've just said that Zosimus wrote it. No, they'd be fucking gunning for me. I think I have it on a sleeve note.
Yeah, well, it's a rumour that's around. Yeah.
Really? So who was Pierce O'Reilly?
Well, it's part of a minuet. There's a whole minuet thing. Jimmy O'Brien's minuet.
Okay.
It's your late 18th century, Christy, 1780s, 1790s. Like, that would be before Zosimus was only born in 1796.
Oh, at least Zosimus was very influenced when he heard it.
Very, very.
Yeah. No, I first heard Frank sing that on one of his very early albums. He sang that on, and I just the age of it, the sense of history in it.
Yeah.
And then he had there was it's a lot of it is slang. And he explained it all in the footnotes to it, and I just thought it was a fabulous song. I used to sing that long time ago.
Well, I have a feeling that the first I ever heard the song was Johnny Moynihan sang it in O'Donoghue's opera, and that was a black and white film that was made way back. So he's the first one I heard singing
Ronnie Drew.
Yeah, and the Graham sisters.
Yeah.
If anybody has never seen that, it's worth having a look at. I think it's on YouTube.
Yeah, you can get it on YouTube.
O'Donoghue's opera. Jesus, great.
Yeah. It's I don't think it was ever really finished, was it? I
couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But in the last part of it, Ronnie is kind of dressed up in prisoner gear, and he's the guy about to be stretched in the morning.
Yeah. He's the laddie that was going to be stretched. Yeah.
And all the band come in and bringing him to moisten his gob before he died. It was great.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
4 or 5 or 6 songs though that Larry Coffey's Goat.
Yeah.
A series of songs, there's about 4 or 5 different ones. Larry Coffey's Goat. He was Larry Coffey apparently.
Okay.
There's another song called the Kilmainham Minuet. The Kilmainham Minute. Where there's a man hung in Kilmainham jail, you see.
So just the night Larry gets stretched. He's not hanged in Kilmainham jail. He's taken from there. He's brought to Dame Street to be hanged.
Yes.
Because he talks about facing King William.
Right.
The practice was at the time that when you were held in the jail, but you were brought back to the place where the crime was committed. I know this from working in the jail. So it's either sometime between 1796 and sometime in the 1840s, because after that they started hanging people just outside the jail.
Yeah.
But previous to that, you were brought back to where the crime was committed.
Okay, thanks, Pat. That's Pat Burke.
Jay, you come to the Frank Harte Festival and they go in for an education. We'll be issuing diplomas on your way out the door. So,
That was about Barney Rush.
Oh, Barney Rush, yeah. I went out to Jersey in the Channel Islands in 1969, and I remember thinking, jeez, I'm really on the way. I was flying to a gig. And I played in this folk club in the Royal Hotel in St. Helier, and Barney Rush was there that night, and he sang. And afterwards I went back to his place and spent a couple of nights with him, and he gave me Nancy Spain and The Crack Was 90 in the Isle of Man, and 2 great songs. And he wrote some other great ones as well. There's one called The Flack, with the flack old tinkers, the pint of stout drinkers. I forget what it's called, but great man, great writer, and lovely man. I got to sing Nancy Spain at his funeral a few years back in Mount Jerome. And he's Barney Rush, from Sallynoggin.
and was he living out in the Channel Islands?
He was in the Channel Islands, and from there he went to South Africa, where he sang, and then he opened up an Irish bar somewhere in Germany, and then he came back. And I remember one night Barney Rush was back, and somebody made contact with me and said, can we have a bit of a session for Barney Rush? And there was a session in the Ferryman, and Frank Harte was there, and Donal Lunny, and Barney brought a fellow with him called Mick Curry. And Mick Curry sang a song called Lawless that he'd written. And that's the way it works, goes on and on. Lawless by name and lawless by nature, always out for the crack. He couldn't all drink, but still he'd get plastered in Clark's every Saturday night. He'd strip to the chest and challenge the vest until the guards they were called to come fast. Oh, they'd lock him away for the rest of the day, leave him out on Sunday morning for mass.
That's sort of a dark sort of a song.
The one thing I love about that song is that you sing it, and halfway through there's a verse, and everybody laughs. And 2 verses later, you can sense people are uncomfortable because they're saying, "Jeez, I shouldn't be laughing at this song." And I love that in a song, you know, that kind of, oh.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
They would have a little twist in it,
Yeah.
or a little, something enigmatic about it. Yeah. And what are you working on at the moment? I know you've an LP coming out or a CD coming out.
It was amazing over the last 18 months to have songs to focus on. And some great songs came my way. That one I spoke to you about, Ricky Lynch sent it to me from Cork. And Paul Doran sent me a song. Paul wrote that song, Natives, and he also wrote a song called The Gardener. And last year, about a month into close down, he sent me this song called Greenland. And oh God, I think it's a beautiful song. We filled the boats with what we hoped would last us for the journey. Silently we gathered on the shore. On the shone the midnight sun, and everywhere around us lay the land where we could stay no more. From the shelter of the bay out to the open water, floating on a picture of the sky, leaving what we knew and not knowing what's to come. One last look and then we said goodbye. To Greenland, Greenland, my soul is in the rock, in the grass and on the air. It lies between the... It's gone. It's good though, isn't it?
Good.
It's a great song.
Okay. We sort of scheduled a bit of a Q&A for the end of the programme. So, do you want to open up for a bit of a question and answer from the audience now?
Fire it out.
Right.
A name that hasn't been mentioned yet, or somebody as a fairly newcomer to the Goodley, is Liam Weldon. Could you say anything about Liam for me?
Well, I encountered Liam, first of all, way back, probably in the 70s. He was involved in the Paves Club with the Keenan family. And that club used to run on the Thursday night, I think, upstairs in Slattery's. You had the traditional on Wednesday and the Paves was on Thursday. And that's where I first met him. And then he used to run a gig in that place opposite Mother Redcaps, Taylor's Hall. And he asked me, invited me to sing there once, and then I was invited out to his house, and we talked and we sang a few songs. And but to tell you the truth, it was only afterwards I became aware of the enormity of his talent as a writer. Yeah. You know, his songs are just enormous, and great singer, great writer, and thank you very much, because he should be mentioned. And of course Nelly, it's always when Nelly comes and sings in the Goleen, she's got something in her voice that's just,
Yeah.
it really goes right in, doesn't it?
Something primordial
Yeah,
in her voice
yeah.
that just lifts you, cuts into you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she used to have a fantastic range as well, and she could just pitch a song
Yeah.
to perfection. And she sings most of, a lot of her songs would be written by Liam, and quite a number of his songs are love songs to her, which must be just powerful to be able to sing a song just so piercing.
Yeah.
And you're the subject of the song. Nelly, yeah. Well,
Is that
there
it?
was someone.
Apart from Holyhead in North Wales, have you ever been detained by the police for actually writing a song? Because they held you up and they deliberately make you miss your train, you know.
Yeah.
And they let you go like 2 minutes after. Because I refused to get that train was about 1:50 in the morning. In London.
Well, to tell you the truth now, I mean, I think any discomfort I might have suffered as regard to songs pales to the discomfort suffered by those I was singing about. You know, it was of... The best one I can say is that when we launched the H-Block album in the Brazen Head in 1979, the special branch raided the launch and confiscated all the albums. And about 25 years later, after a gig, this fella comes up to me with a LP under his coat and said, "Would you ever sign that? I was on the branch the night we raided it."
Did you ever get the copies back?
No.
Oh, I'd put in a claim, Christy.
Jesus. Will you represent me?
Oh, I will. Annette.
Would you like to talk about John Riley?
Oh, God. Well, we went from... we used to go to Prosper's on Wednesday night in Mick Curran's Bedford van. And Pat Dowland was always talking about these grand sisters he'd heard. So one weekend, Mick loaded up the Bedford van and away with us up to Boyle and into Bridie Grahan's pub. And about 8:30 or 9:30, the three girls came out and started playing behind the counter. And they played for a while and it was fantastic. And then the night went on a bit. And then Mrs. Grahan said, "I want a bit of order now for John Riley." And this man whom we hadn't even noticed began to sing over in the corner. And as you very well know, without Tom, we wouldn't have the songs of John Riley. But he was a lovely, gentle, you know him, I mean, you remember John well, and he stayed with you.
He did stay with us.
Yeah.
When we came to Dublin to go to the tradition club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that album, I still listen to the Bonnie Green Tree.
Yeah.
It's, you just put it on, and John starts singing, and he had something. There was some spirit in John's songs that when you start singing them now, it's almost like it re-emerges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he had the same quality that in his singing that I heard in Tom Lennon years later.
Okay.
You know, because they were all that kind of generation of singers who sang in the kitchen. They weren't doing a performance, they were doing sort of an intimate thing.
Yeah.
And they sang to you, you know. And I thought that was lovely, that quality.
Well, no, I would be a great admirer of the singing of Tom Lenihan and of many other singers,
Yeah.
but John Riley had another dimension
Yes.
that I cannot explain.
He wrote songs as well.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
And you think that John, he didn't read or write, and he learnt those songs probably in a bow tent at the side of the road in inclement weather. There's two bitten by your Uncle Dan at the well below the valley, oh, green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. Another to be your uncle down at the well below the valley, oh. Green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. If you be a man in noble steam, you'll tell to me what'll happen, myself, at the well below the valley, oh. Green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. You'll be 7 years a-ringing a bell at the well below the valley, oh. Green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. You'll be 7 years a-porting in hell at the well below the valley, oh. Green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. I'll be 7 years a-ringing a bell with the Lord above me save me soul from porting in hell at the well below the valley, oh. Green grows the lily, oh, right among the bushes, oh. Thank you, Tom and Nelly. Thank you, John Riley. Thanks, John. John's not there. John is not there.
Oh, we'll have to rectify that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so how are we for time now?
That's just about it.
Yeah, any more questions? We take 1 or 2 more questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
Christy, do you remember the first night Planxty in the hangar to go?
I do, yeah.
Was that it?
Were you at that, were you? With your first communion suit? Are you? Judge, you're looking good. Oh, yeah.
So I went to see Donovan, and I said, "My Donovan, there's a crowd coming out there called Planxty, and they're going to be fantastic." So I told a few people about it when we moved out. Not huge expectations or anything, and what's described in the book by Liffy Ciders, which Andy Irvine asked me, was it true? It's exactly true. It was transformative. It was just unbelievable what happened when you started singing and segued into the
Toured them the love.
Just it was like electricity, and then they couldn't stop it. In the end, he said, "We've no more songs," and they said, "Sing it again." They started singing them again, and the roadie for Donovan had to come out after the 4th song and said, "Please, please, please, please come on." But it was absolutely transformative. We were talking about it for days after.
Well, in fairness to Donovan now, he heard us playing. We were playing down in Newbridge, and he was living in Kilcullen. And this is 1971, maybe, 72. And he came to hear us, and then invited us to go on that tour. And that's when we moved out of Slattery's in Capel Street onto bigger stages. It was on the back of Donovan's invitation, you know. And, oh, jeez, that was a great tour, that. Whoa. Oh, the crack was 90 in the Isle of Man.
Heady days, they were heady days. Yeah, so I want to thank you all for coming. Is there any more questions? Oh, sorry, Mick, it didn't get out of my side there.
First time I saw Christy Moore live was in Meat Place.
Oh, God.
Meat Place.
Dorset Street.
Yeah.
That was for 6 or 7 years. That was, oh, it was some scene. But Paddy Spillane, who only died this year, he turned up with my brother-in-law Sid. We were living up in Inchicore, and Sid introduced me to Paddy Spillane. At that stage, they used to run cabaret nights in the meeting place, and Paddy had this idea he'd like to try the Ballads. So he asked me would I. So I started a thing on Monday nights in the meeting place, and that ran for a while. Myself, Jimmy Faulkner, Kevin Burke, Declan McNeilis, and I always remember at the time the long note was just starting on the radio, and Shea Spillane had a little transistor radio, and we used to put it up on the stool at 8 o'clock and switch it on, and the audience used to come in and listen to the long note through the PA and drink pints, and then when that was over, the gig would start. Thanks for remembering that. Yeah, the meeting place was great. very interesting downstairs. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the meeting place.
Well, no, there you are.
Like, that's where I first met Ailish, your sister Ailish.
Yeah.
And Peter.
And Peter.
Didn't they ran a gig in there.
Yeah.
Didn't they? Yeah.
Well, it started off on the Monday nights, but within a matter of 12 months, it was going every night.
Yeah.
And Red Peters and the Floating Dublin Blues Band used to play Sunday afternoon. And Rob Strong used to play there. Declan Sinnott had a gig there.
Yeah, Declan, yeah.
That's the first place, Tipsy Sailor, yeah. Yeah, and that's where I met up with, oh God, you're after Tipsy Sailor's after knocking out of my head now. Wally Page. Wally Page, who is one of our great songwriters.
Yeah, great songwriter, yeah.
You'll have to give Wally a gig at the Goleen. Yes, he has great songs.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you, Christy, for your time
And thank you
the
very much.
effort that you put into, and your loyalty and commitment to the Goleen. We
And
really,
Jerry,
really appreciate it.
thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome.
It's such
Delighted to have
to
you.
remember this man here. The one thing I miss most about this man is the phone calls. We'd ring up and we'd sing songs on the phone, and what a great friend he was, a great singer. Frank Harte, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. Christy Moore.
Let's hear it for Fergus.